Hello, my name's Carol Jarvis and welcome to the British Trombone Society. We are thrilled to be joined today by a trombonist who freelances in most of the UK's leading professional orchestras, from the LSO to the Philharmonia, and she is also a trombone tutor at both Purcell School and the Junior Department of Royal College of Music. So we are really delighted. Please welcome Ruth Molins.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, not at all. It's our pleasure. So I'd like to find out a little bit sort of about how you started, where you grew up, and the kind of opportunities you had as a youngster, and then sort of how you started to carve out such a successful freelance career.
Sure. So I started trombone lessons in primary school when they offered, back in the day where it was free instrumental lessons. They sort of said, have a think about which family of instruments you might like to try, and for some reason I just knew it was brass. My parents were, I think, angling for strings. My dad's an amateur cellist and sort of probably thought he could help me, but I must have just known that was not going to work out well. So yeah, I had in mind brass and I could make a sound, and then I think it was a combination of there being a trombone lying around at my primary school that wasn't being used, and also the fact I had quite prominent front teeth in those days, pre some braces, so it was going to be a safer bet. I think the very, very kind and very subtly put teacher said, you know, have a go on this, and I was delighted it was big and shiny, took it home, and that was it really. But I think having been to lots of concerts and listened to lots of music, I just love the sound of brass, and then obviously the trombone is such a visual instrument that hugely appealed. I was about 8 or 9, I think. And so I had free lessons in school, which was a great way to start. They were individual lessons. They were just 15 minutes, but enough to kind of get a real taste for it. And it was a very small primary school, but it had a little brass group. So right from the outset, I was getting that taste of what playing an instrument like the trombone can lead to, and just thoroughly enjoyed it, and joined the sort of local music centre a year or so later, again, where it's sort of wind band based, really. I suppose you'd say my first ensemble playing was. And that was that. So, and then I guess I switched to having lessons out of school with, again, sort of local teachers, and carried on doing ensemble playing at local level, and then went to the Junior Guildhall when I was about, I think, 12 or 13. So yeah, that's kind of how things started. But it was an instrument that I just really enjoyed playing it and practicing it right away. I'd started the piano when I was a bit younger, and the piano's hard, right? And that always felt like hard work and a bit of a chore. Whereas when it came to getting the trombone out, it just felt a little bit more like some fun. So yeah, that's how it all started, really.
Brilliant. So I guess you must have had some pretty incredible teachers, especially getting to Junior Guildhall and stuff.
I think just really inspiring teachers, teachers who made it fun. And that's something that I've kind of really kept. So my first teacher, Paul Ruby, was through the Barnet Music Service, and he was just great, really encouraging, just got me going. And then I had lessons with Steve Watts and Fred Slicer, again, kind of through that same scene. But they just had a knack of, choosing repertoire that I enjoyed and pushing me a little bit, but it always just felt like good fun, and it was always linked to some kind of, you could join this ensemble. So I remember joining the Barnet Youth Jazz, and I was sort of one of the youngest in it, surrounded by all these very cool people. And you know, again, that was really inspiring because you could see how good they were, and one day, you know, something to aspire to. So yeah, at local level, there was just a lot of good quality, fun, inclusive music making going on that really drew me in, I think. So.
And I suppose in amongst your sort of peers then, some of them must have been going on to music college, university maybe. So what was your then transition to carry on studying music? Were you guided, whether university or music college, or study a different subject, for instance? What was your sort of thought process in that?
Yeah, so I went, my secondary school was a state secondary school, which had tons of music, Dame Alice Owens and Potter's Bar. And that was another kind of really important aspect of, I think, how I just fell in love with playing. Because Bernard Bean, who spoke to Sid Lawrence, and, you know, fantastic bass trombonist, you know, for a state secondary school to have a trombone quartet and a brass ensemble and symphony orchestras and wind bands and a whole host of things that, you know, ordinarily you might only expect might happen in a expensive private school. That was all in my school. So that, coupled with junior guildhall, where I was surrounded with exceptional talent, I mean, people who played far better than me, people like, you know, Alison Bolson was in my year, and Becky Smith, people like that. So you could hear how good I wasn't at that same level at that age, but I could hear it and I liked what I heard. And in my school, I was a big fish in a smaller pond. So I think all of that helped to keep me really loving it and wanting to do it. But actually, when I got to sort of 18, having done junior guildhall and had all this musical experience at local level, at county level as well, Hertfordshire County Music Service was another really important kind of part of my development. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I realised that, you know, you needed to be pretty sure that's the route you wanted to go down as a performer and be doing a lot of practice. And I really enjoyed all the academic side of things, and I did languages for A-level. And so I kind of thought university might be a better fit. And I was taught by Andy Waddicker at Junior Guildhall, and he was supportive of that as well. He could see that I enjoyed my academic studies and said there was nothing to be lost by going to university and, you know, doing a postgrad at the end of it if you still love it enough and you want to do it enough. So for me, that was the right way round for sure, because when I went to my first choice university, which was York, because I really liked the course. It seemed like quite a groundbreaking way of teaching. It was continuous assessment and you had a lot of choice in what you learnt. So it wasn't kind of X number of hours of history and harmony. I mean, that was kind of involved in the course, but you almost devised your own degree. There were various choices, and then you went away and researched, and there was loads of scope for performing. And I had lessons with Rob Burtonshaw, so he had a pot of money to have lessons. And Andy Waddicker gave me the best advice, which was go to Rob Burtonshaw, because he's a brilliant trombonist and he's a thoroughly nice guy. What, you know, you need someone that's going to nurture you a little bit and encourage you. You don't need someone to sort of be too harsh, because, you know, some people need that. I think I was always just aware of all the things I couldn't do, and a slightly more gentle, encouraging approach actually pushed me more, I think, than maybe being in music college and not being the best and at 18 might have put me off, I think. So that was a brilliant. And then I went to the academy as a postgrad and had Dudley Bright and Dennis Wick, who were incredible. And I suppose my desire to get better and keep pushing myself and play alongside and around amazing people just grew and grew. So that's how it built, really. But it was a slow burner, I suppose you'd call it. So surrounded by the whole way through brilliant peers who inspired me and brilliant teachers. So, and
now sort of freelancing, you're out of all full-time education and stuff for quite a few years. Your freelance career all taking off, and your teaching as well all taking off. How do you manage to juggle all of that? I mean, a freelance career with sort of teaching commitments and pressures all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's the teaching has always been something I've enjoyed, and something that's seemed like a natural fit, really, considering my background and what I was mentioning about it. It wasn't like at the age of 11 I want to be a professional trombonist, you know, and all the positive experiences I had. I always wanted to do some teaching, got experience of that quite early on when I was at York. Actually, Rob gave me some students who were maybe really good second study players, or people that had approached him and he didn't have time for. So I got that experience quite early on, which was really valuable. And so, yes, teaching was always something I wanted to do. It wasn't like a diary filler, or I need to do this because it's a bit of security. I was always keen to do some of that. And I felt I could use some of the skills I'd learned in my degree to good effect. But obviously, when I embarked on a postgraduate academy, it's because I loved playing the trombone and I wanted to be doing that. And, you know, I did the Gustav Mahler Youth Orchestra and all of that. And I kind of got this sense of, wow, how high the level is. And these people that had a very different background to me, maybe they'd gone to specialist music school, they'd done MYO, they'd been on Young Musician. That wasn't my backstory at all. But yeah, I was sat amongst them, and that was a great feeling. So I was desperate to get going with the playing, and so I did my postgrad, I did auditions, I got trials, I started going to orchestras, and at that point I wasn't doing as much teaching, and the teaching's grown, and I suppose the tricky thing early on was you never feel you can say no. If work comes in, you've got to do it, because if you keep saying no, they don't ask you back. But I suppose I put the main focus was on my playing initially, and the teaching wasn't as much. And as that's grown, I've been able to be not selective, but in terms of, you know, do the work that I really want to do to enable me still to show commitment to my teaching. And obviously the times we're in right now with COVID, you know, I'm so grateful for my teaching. The fact it's been able to build up, it's kept me going for lots of different reasons, not just financial, but juggling it can be tricky, because in order to keep enjoying performing with brilliant orchestras and amazing colleagues, I have to make sure I'm practicing enough, and I have to make sure that I'm doing it enough, because however much you practice at home, when you're sat there and you've got to come up with the goods, if you're only doing that, you know, if you're not doing it very regularly, it could be pretty terrifying. It's not the same if you're just teaching. So the juggling, I don't really know if I've got it right, or if I'm doing always that brilliant a job of it. But I suppose if I look at it, if I look back through my diaries pre-COVID, and I think, wow, you know, it was quite a nice balance, because on top of the playing and the teaching, I also do a fair bit of participation work. So, you know, the musical outreach work, working in different settings. So that is performing, but it's also using some of my kind of educational background as well.
Can totally see that sort of a juggle. I mean, for instance, you get like a 3-week tour in with the LSO or something. I mean, how do you go, okay, how am I going to work this out?
I mean, in terms of big tours like that, I don't do much of that. I mean, the big orchestral stuff I did more of, you know, I mean, I've got young kids myself, so sort of pre-kids. So I think the other thing, and I don't know how it happened, but it just sort of fell into place, was that the kind of playing work that I'm doing, that I'm offered, tends to be not big tours, tends to be so I've been in, you know, 𝐬𝐞𝐜𝐸 quite a bit, and City of London Sinfonia, and the RPO, and it tends to be chunks of work, a lot of it, some traveling around the UK, but mostly you can get back, or big patches in London. And the odd bit of touring I do doesn't tend these days to be for very long, so for which is actually ideal, because it does mean that I can be there for my students and not, you know, give them a couple of weeks of lessons and not be there for, because I think the level that they're at, it's not like a music college. They need that regular input. They need the regularity of the lessons, and helping them to structure what they're doing. So I don't quite know how that all happened, and it just seems like I've been incredibly lucky, really, because that also fits in with home life as well, that the type of work I'm offered just allows me to do the teaching and feel like I'm showing the commitment I need to. So yeah, lucky, I suppose. Luck.
I think you're being harsh on yourself there. I think, I mean, you make your own luck, and you're obviously so good at what you do. So I mean, personally, I think your path sort of works itself out because of all your skills. So it works out to your benefit.
Yeah, it's nice to feel that you are using kind of different aspects of what you've trained to do. So some of the time that means just sitting, being quiet, not offering your opinions, listening to other people, being guided by them, being directed by, you know, your section or the conductor or whatever it is. And other times you're the one that's leading, or you're the one that's directing, and that's nice. That keeps me fresh, I think, and it keeps me learning.
And when you say about your participation work and stuff, sort of outreach things, do you feel that you're you say you're playing, but also you're teaching at the same time? So do you feel that your sort of experience through your teaching has helped shape you more as a player?
Absolutely. I mean, when I look back to the teaching, when I first started teaching, you know, you sort of, well, it's that confidence of youth, I suppose, that I came out of the academy not at all thinking like I've done it now, I know what I'm doing playing wise at all. That's almost the start. Like, you've had a lot of instruction, and now you've got to go out and you've got to really figure out. But I suppose I kind of assumed, because I'd reached a decent level on the trombone and I'd had good teachers, how hard can it be? Give me the student, I'll teach them what I know. But all those kind of insights into problem solving, their technique, or finding routes into getting them to think about the music, treating them as individuals, all of that stuff, that's such a steep learning curve, and it makes you problem solve things in a way that, so you take it back to your own playing and you think, well, that's something I've actually always found really hard. How did I overcome that? Or also sometimes you get students who, you know, incredibly talented students, how on earth are they doing that? How do they make that sound so easy? And I end up saying to them, what did you just do? You know, if they're playing something, you know, a contemporary piece or something. So constantly in my practice looking at what I need to keep working on, what are my strengths, how do I do that, why am I finding that hard? And again, I think it keeps me enjoying it, because, you know, it's not like you just reach this level with your playing and you can't get any better. I really don't believe that. And that's the same for teaching. Like, I hope that my teaching constantly evolves and that I'm getting better as I get older, as opposed to just going, well, that's how I do things. I would hate that to be the case, you know.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I remember having a student that was really, really sort of struggling, and some colleagues of mine actually said, don't let it affect your playing. And I never thought of it that way, but it's so a two-way experience, really, isn't it?
One student I remember struggling so much with just like basic articulation, just not being able to get that clarity, and you thought, God, is that me? Or, you know, but I think that's how, I mean, as long as you don't literally go to pieces and assume that you're rubbish, and therefore, but I mean, if you're able to analyze it like that, and even if it's just pointing them to listen to this, you know, signposting them to, right, you just need to listen to lots of this person playing, or listen to this type of repertoire, or whatever it might be. Yeah, it can affect you hugely if you feel like a student's kind of not moving on, or likewise, it can be such a buzz, even if the simplest breakthrough, if it's like a range thing or something, you think, oh, finally they're building that high register or whatever.
For me, it's always breathing. I mean, I have to bring up breathing because it's just something that we've all got to do, and it takes, in my experience, it takes people quite a while to be able to do it properly. So
Yeah.
How do you sort of encourage pupils to sort of develop their breathing? I mean, at Conservatoire, I find that they're not even breathing well throughout their first year, second year. I'm like, how can you sort of install that in sort of a younger player to make sure that their exercises or approaches then help them further on?
Often I find, shockingly, quite early on, posture has been really neglected. And I do think posture and breathing are kind of intrinsically linked. So, you know, you cannot breathe well if you're not stood or sat well. So that's something because often you talk about breathing and they just assume they've got to just get more air in faster and get rid of the air. And obviously it's not that. So again, something that I've taken on board, I've done a fair bit of Alexander technique. So I'll signpost them quite often, even if I don't see any massively obvious postural issues, to just thinking a little bit about releasing that tension and standing and sitting well. Keeping fit's another thing. I mean, I think the younger generation now are a lot more mindful of that than possibly we were when we were, you know, that age. You know, they all seem far more clued up to the importance of that from a health perspective, but also a playing perspective. So I tend to gently, with the much younger ones, so, you know, sort of start of secondary years, ones that are really good, just say, before we start doing sort of any detailed breathing work, you know, make sure you're getting make sure you're doing some sort of cardiovascular exercise. And let's make sure you're sat and you're stood well when you're playing all of the time. Make sure the music stands in the right place at the right height. Make sure they're not, you know, the amount of times you see people just not playing, you know, the position of the slide isn't correct with the music stand. And once that's set up, I tend to find they look and sound more relaxed and they start breathing better anyway. And then in terms of, breathing exercises, just start really simply with that notion of it being as relaxed as possible, but it's not, you know, you're not sat in front of the TV type breathing. It's the effort to get the air in, and then thinking about, as you know, just the idea of blowing through. That tends to be the big issue I have. It's just the stopping of the blowing and trying to get them, just that notion of really filling the instrument with air, whatever the dynamic might be, getting rid of that air, then re-topping up. So many students, that thing of taking too many breaths and they never really got rid of what was there in the first place, that breeds tension. So yeah, I suppose that's my starting point, really. Especially with the younger ones, I just want them to be as relaxed as possible and think of breathing as being a natural thing, but then something that is constantly something I'm going to work on. And it's also tends to be the first thing I say to all of them that will go, you know, if you've had a holiday or a break, which incidentally I always recommend, to do have some time away from your instrument, but that will be the thing that actually suffers. You know, everyone thinks, oh, I won't be able to. The lip will sort of get back into it, but it will be the breathing that, for me anyway, certainly takes quite a while to come back. So yeah, that, I guess that's how I approach it. And then obviously I've got more advanced breathing exercises and techniques as they move through, but I like to approach it from a more holistic postural and fitness point of view early on, I think.
Yeah, such good advice. I mean, I'm totally with you. Whenever I've taken a bit of time off, the first thing out of practice is my lungs. That's it. Every time. So how did you first get into teaching?
Yeah, so as I said, when I was at York doing my degree, I think it was in my last year, a couple of students, and poor things. I mean, I'd never done this before, and I sort of, you know, you just kind of teach stuff how you've been taught, but well, not as well, because I was taught. So I hadn't developed my way of kind of thinking about. So, but it was a first experience of kind of, I clocked that, and I thought, gosh, I'm probably not explaining this very well. And there were two of them, and one of them, it was clear, responded better from me just maybe playing, and then, you know, so they copy or they play along or duets. And the other one, who wasn't as advanced, did need things breaking down more. That was the first taste. And then when I did my postgrad, I wasn't teaching, I was just practicing lots and immersed in all things, playing the trombone for 2 years. And when I left, I took on some teaching in a school. So in those early days, when I was first out of college, it was challenging teaching. And what I mean by that is, you know, kids in schools that weren't as well resourced, who maybe their home lives, they didn't have places, you know, they weren't living somewhere that was very easy to practice. So the opportunities were there, but the potential for them to be able to really explore that, it was much harder for them than it ever had been for me. And my expectations on what they could do between lessons were unrealistic, because I was naive and I was inexperienced. And I remember as well, the sorts of repertoire I was suggesting, you know, it was obvious that it's not what they wanted to be playing or doing, you know. So you quickly learn that just because you thought that was fun to do when you were 12, like, they're a lot cooler than you were. So, you know, to be more creative in thinking about repertoire. So those were useful years, although I wasn't, none of them were massively into it. It was mixed brass. It was a window into understanding the role of an instrumental teacher, which is not just about getting someone to play their instrument brilliantly. It's about actually inspiring them, getting them to want to pick up their instrument and to explore music in some way. And then I took on a job at an independent school that was very well resourced, you know, very lucky kids, lucky school, lots of instruments. And there were two trombonists. So they'd had an overall trombone teacher an overall brass teacher in the school. And then the new head of music wanted, you know, a trombone teacher, a trumpet teacher, a horn teacher. So there were two there. And that slowly built up. And I'm still there. I'm not going to tell you how many years later, because that will give away my age, which is alarmingly quite old. But there are now 23, I think, was the last count, trombonists in a girls' school. Amazing. Two trombone groups, so one all on P-bones, and one, you know, in the senior. So it's a primary and a secondary all on one side. And I mean, I have to big up P-bones at this point, because, you know, it's very easy. Oh, how amazing, she's gone in there and built up all these strengths. I have to say that the biggest way to inspiring 8-year-old girls in this school was to take 6 or 7 multi-cut, you know, P-bones in and play them lots of fun tunes that they recognise. And there's more trombonists than there are flautists in this school. So I do thank the P-bone for that.
Wow, that's amazing. But it's not, you can't just thank P-bone though. It's definitely down to you as well.
No, it's that, and this is, I feel like that's where I really started to develop my skills, because there were a lot of beginners, which is scary, because then anything you feel isn't going very well, the buck stops with you. You can't blame someone else hasn't taught them how to breathe or how to tongue. Like, hang on a minute, they've only been taught by me. So, and obviously different students put different amounts of effort into it. But what's been lovely is, you know, I've started some of those off at age, let's say 7, 8, gone right through. I've had 3 join me at the RCM junior department. So that's been probably one of my kind of proudest things, to have started them off on a pink piece of plastic, and they've gone on and done really well, you know, got their diploma, and they're all terribly bright. They go on and read classics at Cambridge and things, but, you know, they love playing the trombone, and they're carrying on doing that, and they're involved in all those ensembles and considering doing a postgrad. And and that's been great. And then during the course of that, I was given the opportunity to do some deputy teaching at the RCM Juniors when Amos Miller was teaching there, and sort of asked to sit in on some of his lessons, because I knew he was such an experienced teacher, and a really inspiring teacher. And that's the thing, it can be quite lonely when you're in a room with students. However much you try and ask your colleagues what they're doing, it's really useful to be able to see it. So that helped. And then he moved on and I took over. And then that's been, you know, an absolutely fantastic thing, and continues to be, because I'm working with not only the fact that they're really talented, these kids, but just how much they love it. Their enthusiasm is, you know, it radiates from them and keeps me on my toes and keeps me enthusiastic. And then more recently, I've taken over at the Purcell School again, and that's a similar situation. Kids for whom playing their trombone is a really important part of their lives, and it's a huge privilege to be able to work with them.
That's amazing. I love all of that. I mean, that's a huge credit to you. And I love the way you speak about your students that have gone from P-Bone right through to Junior Royal College. That's just, I mean, it's they might have gone on to study classics then, because they're extremely clever in lots of other subjects, but you must have helped install all sorts of skills in that, like teamwork, sense of achievement, discipline, all those skills that we know as musicians you get from music education, no matter whether you go on and study it at a further level.
I think that's the thing, and that's what I think when I look back and I first started teaching, it was all about, well, I just want to get them to be able to be a bit more flexible, and you know, I'd like to get them onto this. And I mean, I hope that never came across, but that dialogue was in the back of my mind the whole time, like it should sound better than it does. And I think shifting the focus to be, I just want them to always associate this as something enjoyable, and it's only ever going to be a small percentage of people that want to go on and do this professionally. That's not the goal. The goal is to get people playing as well as they can, given the situation they're in, given what their other priorities are, because the better you're able to do something, the more enjoyable it is. Getting them to experience a whole range of ensemble playing, and so it's like a lifelong skill and a lifelong passion, and that's always the best feedback. I mean, you get great exam results or diploma results, or people getting places in the National Youth Orchestra. Of course, that's lovely, but that's down to their really hard work. It's when they feed back that, you know, they get in touch 5 or 10 years later and say they're still playing and loving it, or the ones that were really shy. I mean, there's one particular student who, you know, I was surprised when she sort of came into the room, sort of age, terribly shy, timid. Not what you'd expect when all those other instruments have been offered, that she'd choose this, you know, but it has been such a confidence builder. It has enabled her to mix with all kinds of people and all kinds of ensembles. And it has really helped her and lots of others to grow and to have confidence, which is just, such an amazing thing.
Oh, that's so lovely. And I remember you talking about that sort of learning that you just got to inspire them. And like you say, what was cool for you age 12 might not be cool these days. I remember my piano lessons, my teacher was all about Bach. We've got to play Bach. And I was like, I just hate my piano lessons, until I discovered Debussy. And then I take that into my lesson, and suddenly it completely changes you as a player.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a similar experience with the piano teacher as well. When I went to Junior Guildhall, and I was always, piano was always hard work for me. Just lovely teacher that kind of went, okay, well, there's a few technical things, but you just play really musically and try this piece. And sometimes it's just someone saying something nice, or someone saying, that's a real strength. Or have you ever heard, I mean, I always love it when you introduce a student to a composer they might not have come across, or a piece they haven't played, or saying, you're not just limited to this repertoire. Why don't you look at this cello piece or this bassoon piece? Or why don't you, if you like that, why don't you figure out how to write that down? Or why don't you learn it by ear? Or you don't just have to play this study or this piece because it's on some syllabus. That's not what it's about. And sometimes that can be enough to click on it for them to really want to do it.
So how have you sort of had to adapt your teaching and stuff during the pandemic? I'm guessing you're still teaching all your students as normal, but all online?
That's it. So I mean, back in March last year, obviously it was pretty scary because it happened quickly, didn't it? That suddenly and I'd never ever taught online before. And whilst I could see how it might work for the students at the junior RCM and at Purcell, the ones that, you know, are quite advanced, I did worry for, you know, some of my little ones, that how that was going to work. But you adapt, and I did straight away in a combination of Zoom and Skype. And was actually very surprised by how successful it can be, and how you can still have a really productive and a really positive lesson. I think it probably took more planning on my part and more note taking between lessons, because, you know, not being in the same room, there's that slight barrier to communication in some ways, or continuity of the lessons. But I got going, and then very lucky last term, so the autumn term at Purcell, it was a completely normal term back face to face, which was fantastic, back doing my ensemble and my chamber music coaching, and my school as well, the girls' school back there. Junior college, the junior conservatoires have been harder hit for obvious reasons. You know, you've got kids coming from a wide geographical area, and just the nature of their full days on Saturday, in and out of different ensembles, impossible to bubble them really. So we had, I think, 3 possibly chamber music days. So I've got a trombone ensemble and I've got a brass quintet. So we met 3 times out of 10 weeks, but all the teaching's been online. I think the main adaptation I've made is just to be really mindful, as hard as it is for us as adults, you know, the age group I'm teaching, predominantly teenagers, this is really tough time. And all the stuff I loved doing when I was a teenager was playing in orchestras and playing with other people. And that's what's not happening. So you can have the most, you know, you could put as much energy as you like into giving someone a really productive, hopefully entertaining lesson, that they leave with some ideas of what to work on, but they leave feeling empowered that they can do it, never leaving like, I'm rubbish, I haven't done that, or this needs to improve, ever. I never want anyone to leave a lesson feeling that. And I feel even more of a pressure to do so on that now. So, you know, if their mental health is a bit wobbly at the moment, who can blame them? Just to it might be that we take a different tack of, you know, well, let's just really spend some time looking at excerpts and set them a listening list, and whatever you manage to do, and let me know what your favourite one is, and here's some excerpts, and have a go at those. Or set, you know, focus on one technical parameter that they want to improve, so they're not feeling compelled to learn a new concerto or whatever it is. So I guess a more bespoke, more kind of holistic approach to what they're doing at the moment, because without any of that bouncing off their peers, and because that's how you learn, right? It's, you learn from your teacher, but you learn so much from your peer group, and that's what they're not getting. I just really feel for them.
Yeah, so difficult. Have you had any sort of gained any sort of real positives from the online experience?
Yeah, I mean, I would say actually it has made me, in a way, plan out what I'm going to do more, which I did then take into my face-to-face teaching last term. So the first lesson online, we did some playing and things, but, you know, I chat to them, you know, what do you think you need to work on, or what is just something you'd like to do, or, you know, what do you listen to actually? And I'd make notes, and then I try and kind of ensure we covered some of that, or if I hadn't heard of this band or this singer or whatever it might be, actually to listen to more music myself of that genre or whatever, so that I'm a little bit more on their wavelength. So I think the planning and the content of the lessons has maybe been more imaginative. I think as well, because usually I liked with the Purcell students and the college students, I like to do a lot of duet playing in lessons with them, because it's good for sight reading and intonation and all of those things, to demonstrate more, so kind of call and response in lessons, so, you know, getting them to learn exercises or scale patterns by ear. So again, you know, it's been positive, because I can't turn up sounding like a rusty old kettle. You know, I've got to keep on top of my playing, which, you know, we're all human. If you've got an empty diary and no playing work coming up, these students have kept me motivated and grounded, and that sense of duty that, you know, I can't just get it out of the case and sound rubbish. How's that going to inspire them or like make them want to practice, you know? So they've done me a big favour, actually, I have to say. I owe them a huge deal.
So you think the sort of motivation sort of goes both ways a bit.
100%, absolutely, yeah.
I don't know, that's kind of something that's come out of this pandemic, is helping them. I don't know, how do you keep a good routine when you're just in the same four walls all the time? You're just, I mean, do you think people's sounds are going to get smaller and smaller because they're just getting used to that room? I mean, how do you think people should be sort of focusing their practice? And
I think that is something that I noticed when I went back last term. People's dynamic range had, shrunk. So everything was mezzo something. And yeah, it took me a week. I was being very thick, but that was the thing, when you look back, it's like, but they used to make this massive, they used to really blow here, and like they used to take more risks with the, and I think it's that you're in, who knows what people's own individual acoustics are like. Often people are playing very small, very dead rooms, or sometimes a very nice boomy room, so they get a false sense of things as well. That so this time round I have, and because on Zoom as well, you don't get those subtleties necessarily of what people are trying to do, or Skype, or however you're teaching. So I have included a bit more of that, a bit of setting them exercises with lots of dynamics and things, and note production, and getting them to imagine they're in a huge concert hall and they're playing to grandma with a hearing aid, in the cheap seats. And so it's not, I don't want to hear, it's not really about playing really, really loud. It's about that projection of sound, that breath, going back to breathing, and to close their eyes and imagine themselves. Now imagine yourself, in this type of acoustic, how would you play? Obviously this is, with more advanced students, but even with the littlies, even with the young ones who, grade 5, whatever it might be, to try and get them to still think about the quality of their sound, open your teeth, don't clench, just relax, it doesn't matter, but think about a nice open sound, and think about giving me more dynamic contrasts. I think I neglected that last time, or it was just impossible to keep a track of it. That was the big thing I noticed after the first, the lockdown last time, the big one.